I really don't think I left IBA thinking that I'm going to be a CEO. I felt as a woman telling myself again and again that I can do it was a huge game changer.
This is actually a big thing for a mother to, choose this decision that the kids are going to stay in the country and I'm going to live in this other continent.
I think we assume that there is a glass ceiling. And we have to understand that the glass is actually, see through. I think in Pakistan, you find very few men who don't have an inflated ego and are very comfortable having a wife who's doing all that I've ended up doing.
I just feel like, building the career and building your own self goes along the way.
That places where I would not naturally be part of a group, I pushed my way through to say, give me at least a seat at the table.
Claim your space and not just wait for a seat at the table.
I don't think men are trying to keep women away. It's just natural for one gender to be hanging around with the same gender. I want to achieve something because I want to prove to men. I think we get into the wrong angle of diversity. I really think it's high time that Pakistani women stopped thinking of log kya kahenge.
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. This is Mariam Jamal and welcome to another episode of Women Leader Series by Women Entrepreneurs of Asia. Today's conversation is super exciting because we're joined by a leader whose journey many entrepreneurs can relate to. She has built her career across iconic consumer brands and leadership roles. And today she'll be sharing lessons on growth, confidence, and of course, leadership. She's the CEO of the food division at Smile Industries. Please welcome Farheen Salman Amir. Assalamu alaikum, Farheen.
Walaikum assalam.
क्या हाल है आपके?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. I am so glad to have you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's start with your journey, Farheen. You have built an impressive career throughout, mashallah. Starting from a management trainee to the CEO now of the Smile Industries. So how did you, what motivated you to maybe early on to take this path?
I really don't think I left IBA thinking that I'm going to be a CEO. I don't think, a random 22-year-old ever thinks of their career like that. What changed somewhere along my journey, when I got into Unilever, I was a management trainee with Unilever. I started really enjoying my work. So I had done a marketing major from Unilever. I didn't realize that, advertising, getting to know consumers, building campaigns, building brands would really become a passion point. And the more I did it, to be very honest, the more I kept thinking, all right, let's look at the next step and the next step and the next step. And I think that's how my career kind of, rolled on. The only inflex in my career where I felt I really thought through and I said, okay, is this what I want to do? And is this going to take me to the next level? Was my stint in Turkey. When I left and the family was still in Pakistan, that was really a point where I did take I sat back, I thought through, and I said, okay, if I'm able to do this, then maybe a GM slot or a CEO is somewhere around the horizon, which came much later on in my life. But I think when I left IBA, ये बिल्कुल दिमाग में नहीं था कि this is where I'm going to be ending up.
Great. So you've spent over around 2 decades at the Unilever,
Embarrassingly so. Yes, embarrassingly so.
leading multiple categories. There was food and beverages, ice cream, right? And then again, mentioning the role of global role, including Turkey. So what were the most important lessons that you learned from these, international experiences?
So in particular for Turkey, I'll tell you what really resonated with me both doing those 2 years. I felt as a woman, telling myself again and again that I can do it was a huge game changer. Initially, when that role was offered to me, in fact, I applied for that role and I really didn't think I would get it. And I actually did get it. In my mind, with two little kids in Pakistan, with a husband who has a local business in Pakistan, who at no point, could have stepped out. Initially, my view was this is just not doable. This is, and people around me, my parents were concerned. My friends were saying, are you sure you'll be able to do that? Initially, we decided that my kids and I would move to Istanbul and my husband would stay in Pakistan. When we went for look-see, it's a term we use to go and assess, where are you going to be living? Where are your kids going to be studying? When my husband and I with our two kids went for a look-see, to Istanbul, we realized that place is very alien, for kids who are 7 and 8 years of age. They had their grandparents here, they had their schooling in Pakistan, they had everything set here. And that trip was really, now that I'm thinking about it, I still get goose flesh, because my husband and I sat down and we said, do we really want to change so much in our life? I personally really wanted that role. I really wanted to push the boundaries and see what all could I do with my career. But why would I take my kids out of, a set, very established pattern of school, of being with grandparents, with their father here? So that decision of leaving them behind and moving for 2 years to Turkey, that really somewhere in my mind unshackled me. So I would do 3 weeks in Turkey, in Istanbul. I was also very fortunate that Unilever had a system like that, where I would do 3 weeks in Istanbul and I would do a week, which became 9 days if I included the weekends with it.
Right.
So I did 9 days, in Pakistan, 3 weeks in Istanbul, and I did that for consecutively 2 years,
Right.
which meant 27 visits that I did to Pakistan in those 2 years, and 7 visits that my husband and my kids, made to Istanbul to spend time with me. I think those 2 years really broke a paradigm in my own mind that, what all can I do? What all can, not just me, but this, tight knit
Hmm.
family setup that I have with my kids and my husband and myself, what all can we go through? And I think after that, some of the decisions that I've taken in my life were based on having done Turkey, knowing that that was possible, knowing that a family can live in two different continents and still be very, very close. That made me choose a few different things when I came back from Turkey.
Great. Like I'm actually glad and surprised to know this story. Like this is actually a big thing for a mother to, choose this decision that, maybe the kids are going to stay in the country and I'm going to live in this other continent, and then doing this for consecutive 2 years, coming over and leaving them behind and then calling them again, they're big thing. But I'm glad you did it. And you're breaking those ceilings.
Yes.
So
And
the
I
last
think more than, and I think a glass ceiling, I keep saying this to a lot of women that I get together with. I think a glass ceiling is less physical and more mental.
That's right. That's actually true. Very true.
A lot of women, entrepreneurs, a lot of women in the corporate world, when I catch up with them, I do feel that, and when I myself reflect upon my past, I think we assume that there is a glass ceiling. And we have to understand that the glass is actually, see through. So don't imagine that there is a glass ceiling. Just live your life for your own achievement, for your own sense of accomplishment, and the world kind of adapts to it. I genuinely feel that the world comes along and kind of accepts the choices that you make. Of course, I don't want to be flippant and say that but I just did this and I achieved this. I think there was an entire group of people, a village as they call it, when you're bringing up your kids, there was a whole village that supported me in making Istanbul happen. My husband, of course, a person I've now known for more than 30 years, mashallah. I went to college with him, and thank God I chose to marry him. Because I think in Pakistan you find very few men who don't have an inflated ego and are very comfortable having a wife who's doing all that I've ended up doing. So be it my husband, be it my mom, who kind of would cook food for me for those 9 days. I would pack all that food, take it with me to Istanbul, so I never had to cook while I was in Turkey. My father-in-law, who picked up the kids and dropped them off to school. So there's of course like an entire ecosystem that goes along with supporting women who want to do a bit more beyond being at home.
That's right. That's so true. And these supportive families are one of the key points where the women can actually step up out of the house and can build her own career and
Absolutely.
build her own self. I just feel like building the career and building your own self goes along the way.
Absolutely.
So wonderful to know about the family support coming towards your way, and I'm happy to know the way you balance the professional ambition and then the personal life, being the CEO and as a mother again. All right. So, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced since you moved into the senior leadership, especially in the I say male dominated boardrooms, and how did you overcome them?
So I think I think the biggest challenge has never been for me to not express myself when I am around the table. right? If you're invited to the table, that's always the easiest, but not always are you invited to the table, right? So to speak. I think the biggest challenge, again, from a breaking of a barrier in my own mind was that places where I would not naturally be part of a group because I'm just not the gender that would be sitting around the table.
Right.
I pushed my way through to say, give me at least a seat at the table, right? Be it my participation at the OICCI, be it my taking over Pakistan Advertiser Society as a chairperson, wherever I felt that there was, not a deliberate move. I don't think men are trying to keep women away. It's just natural for one gender to be hanging around with the same gender. I mean, a lot of discussions on businesses do happen at the smoking corner. A lot of discussions do happen at a paddle game where it might just be men hanging around together, after office hours. So I don't think there's some malice involved in men wanting to keep women away. But yes, it's not as inclusive as I feel what women leaders generally, do to a team. I think it's much more of a woman characteristic to just bring everybody along, and I think for men, it's just easier to be with just other men, right? So wherever I was not invited to the table, I felt that was the biggest challenge where I needed to kind of, get an invitation out of the male, group and still be at the table. But once I'm at the table, I've really never had an issue in having an opinion or expressing an opinion.
That's good to know. Also, I know about you that you have also always been, a strong voice towards the women leadership, and you have always said that claim your space and not
Absolutely.
just wait for a seat at the table, right?
And once you're at the table, really make sure that everybody around the table values the content that you're bringing out. So I don't think just being at the table is a tick mark that I ever wanted. I still don't want to be at a table just to be seen as, Fareen is here. If I'm there, if there is something that I can contribute, towards, if there is something that I can have an impact towards, why not? And I've always noticed, again, I'll take a few names. OICCI. Right now, I'm helping out with the European Union with their Park Business, network. Once you're at the table, if you are, bringing value to those conversations, you'll automatically get repeat invitations.
Right.
It's the first invitation
Yes.
which is a problem. It's the first step forward that where you say, you know what, put a seat aside for me. I want to be at this table. Once you're at the table, at least personally, I've felt that if you're bringing, if you're bringing knowledge, you're bringing expertise, you're bringing good intent, there'll always be a repeat invitation.
Right. And how do you think the women leaders can actually shift these societal expectations and the workplace norms?
If you're talking about what all can we do to make it easier for the younger generation and women within the younger generation to follow suit, I do feel a lot of times there's more, conversations and more discussions about wanting, inclusion and diversity. There's less action towards it. And what do I mean by action? I don't think changing an HR policy of the percentage of women that you need at senior levels is the only thing that a company needs to do. To bring in women, you need to be looking at your infrastructure. I think a lot of companies just assume that a very male oriented infrastructure or set of facilities or administration will absorb women. And the reality is, it will not. I'll give you an example. When I had kids, I was at Unilever. I was already, a marketing director when I had my first child. Of course, I needed a daycare. Of course, I needed, a place within the daycare for feeding sessions. Of course, I needed a maternity leave which was in line with global practices. Of course, when I traveled after having my first child, and then I had my second child also very, very quickly after that, I needed maybe not one ticket, but two tickets to travel because my kid would come along, right? And my husband would come along, to support me on those official trips. So there has to be, I'm not at all saying that women, can only survive when a company just gives in all. And that's not my perspective here. We need to, as a company, and that's what I ensured for Lipton when I took over Lipton, and that's what I'm really trying to work with the HR at a Smile Industries and bring about a change on that front. We need to meet women midway. What do I mean by that? We need to give them a place where, they can bring their kids, because that is normally when women have children, that is the highest probability of a woman leaving her career. We know that from data. We know that from, studies done on women careers. We need to ensure that women are given something as basic as, clean, independent washrooms. I've actually visited distributor premises. As a CEO, I'm in the market a lot. There's still premises which have a unisex washroom, right? There's still premises, by the way, in Lahore, in Islamabad, where I will go to a distributor's premise and he will actually say, Madam, mera wala bathroom istemal kar le. And I'm thinking, you'll never be able to bring in women in sales. If I need to use a male washroom, and I get offered a very clean washroom because they're prepared for my visit now that I am a CEO. What happens to a woman who comes in as an assistant manager? What happens to a woman who comes in as a junior manager in sales? So we need to first, meet women midway through and give them the infrastructural changes that are required for them to be successful. Once you've done that as a company, then you can expect a lot more, in terms of a balance between men and women, and between this constant conversation of inclusion and diversity, which is not founded or not backed by having facilities that a woman will require.
That's right.
So it's be it travel, be it having children, be it areas for namaz. Those are really basic fundamental things that a few companies are totally missing out on. And the more I look around in the Pakistani environment, the more I realize I don't think it's about men, viciously not wanting women to move forward. It's men being unaware of what is needed for women to be successful. And as a woman leader, I feel one of my biggest, social impacts would be if I can just educate men, and an all male, board of what is required for really, ambitious, young, hardworking women to come in. I know this is going a bit longer than I expected, but this is really a topic very close to my heart. At Lipton, we realized there were certain roles when I took over as Lipton's president for Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. I realized there were certain roles where we needed capability that could do about 5 hours a day, and they could do it from wherever, at home, at a cafe, from the office. As far as it delivered, we were okay with that platform of work being done on limited hours. So we started something with now Unilever is calling, a career by choice. It was in fact an inspiration that I took from Unilever. Career by choice simply means if you're a young mom with, let's say, a special child at home, you're a young mom who has, let's say, a husband who's constantly traveling, and you can't do a 9 to 5 corporate career. Doesn't matter. Pick up a role that you can do sitting from home, maybe coming to work twice a week. That also just for coordination with the office, and just for face to face with your team. And you just do that for the number of hours that are available for you. We'll either do job sharing. So one woman does 5 hours and another woman does another 2, 3 hours, and we make both of them do the same role. We experimented with that. We experimented with actually just career by choice. Come in whenever you have the time to come in, and we'll tweak the role. We'll transform the role to expect a deliverable only dependent on those number of hours. I can tell you with all my heart that experiment made me find women who were going way above the call of duty, way above the call of duty, to give us, the output, and to give us the KPIs that were, a dream come true. I've done this experiment now for almost 5 years in my life. Whenever I meet a woman where I feel she's struggling with how she's going to be balancing off her life, her personal life, her travel, her husband's travel, in-laws, expectations of being at school. Some schools are actually becoming very stringent about, as a parent, you have to be there in the morning, you have to be there for swimming classes, blah, blah, blah. If she can't do a 9 to 5, why would we miss out on her capability? Why would we not want her as, a participant in the growth of an organization? I've done this experiment, and if there's anything that I can get out of this podcast, if other men and women who are at a position of power can adapt, career by choice, I can reassure them they will be thrilled with the results of that experiment. Do it as a pilot. I've done it many times. Women who worked not more than 5 hours a day have actually been available for me at 1 in the morning if I needed them for something, because they were just so committed to the roles that we were able to provide for them. So once you give women a little bit of helping hand, you give them, almost a stick of, of help. You actually see, the ones that want to prove and have a social impact moving mountains.
Wonderful. The points that you just mentioned, I'd say the pain points of the women, they are so important. I'm so happy that you're addressing them, because these are a few pain points that nobody ever addressed, I believe. And after listening to you and your experiences, that have your journey that has shaped all this, now I can say that we actually need to educate the men more instead of women, that we've been doing, and we've been trying again and again to motivate the women. Instead, we need to educate the men. That's actually very true.
One, educate them, yes. Second, I also do believe that women need to just keep achieving and just keep doing what they feel is going to bring them a sense of confidence, a sense of accomplishment. A lot of times when you make this world about, I want to achieve something because I want to prove to men, I think we get into the wrong angle of diversity.
That's right.
For me, diversity is male, female, any gender wanting to do what they want to do to the bestest of their ability. That for me is true inclusion and diversity. It's not about setting an expectation personally for me, of what men will learn from me or what women will learn from me. What I want to really ensure about my life is that when I look back at the age of 60, when I look back upon my life, there should be no regret of what I could do and what I could achieve and what I knew I could do, and I just, because of my own mental barriers or my own, reluctance, emotional reluctance, could not dig into. For me, that is a much bigger mandate, and I think that's a mandate because it's so personal. It makes you achieve a lot more. When you become, I again, could be different perspectives. Personally, what's worked for me, when I've looked at my career vis-a-vis somebody else, I've not done too well. When I've looked at my career vis-a-vis myself, or what I would tell myself, this is what Fareen can achieve, is Fareen really achieving that? I think I've actually gone many miles ahead with that thought process versus, that person got a CEO role. I'm still waiting for a CEO role. That person got 5 countries. I only got 3 countries. That kind of competitiveness, honestly, I just feel it is so outwardly placed. It is so dependent on other people and not your own core abilities, that I find that space to be a bit uncomfortable. I find that space a lot more, confidence building, where I say, I know this. I want to learn this bit. With my new learning, with my existing knowledge, I can actually scale one more mountain. I feel that just empowers me a lot more as a person.
That's actually right. In fact, I've seen people who are, more focused on competing this other person instead of, looking
Just
towards
compete with
their goal.
yourself. Just
Yeah,
compete with
yeah.
yourself.
Looking towards their goal. And that's how they miss out so much. That's actually a fact. Anyway, so now leading the Smile Industries, um, you're leading multiple categories, I believe, multiple brands, in fact. There's Candyland, Bisconi, and I think Snack City as well, right? So, what is your strategic vision? Or I'd say, how are you shaping that strategic vision for growth in such an evolving consumer market?
Well, I've been there barely about 5, 6 months, so I don't want to act like an overconfident CEO by saying, "Oh, I know it all." I've seen the company. This is what I have as a vision. No, I think when the owners of a company, this is very proudly a Pakistani, entrepreneurial setup that has grown stupendously over the last, 10 to 15 years. When you deal with people like the Ismail family who themselves know these categories so very well,
Right.
for me, the first 5, 6 months of interaction with them have really been about absorbing the passion of, you know, leading brands and leading businesses. And I think that's what has really inspired me the first 5 or 6 months that I've been with them. The whole intent of looking at a snacking category and trying to transform that is really what my personal ambition is. For Smile Industries,
Yeah.
I think we have beautiful brands. Our product range, our innovation, our speed to market. is just superb. I come from a totally multinational background where you would strategize and then you would put a roadmap together and then you would execute, and that would take about 6 to 8 months, or maybe sometimes even 9 to 12 months. Here, I'm I'm able to see structures being put together, processes being kind of reformed, and work being done at the pace of lighting, actually. In 6 weeks, we were able to put together innovation and bring it to the market. So my vision for them, very half-baked, even, since I'm so new there, is really to look at the snacking world of Pakistan and see how Ismail Industries can actually transform that for the eras that are coming up.
Great. And what are the most exciting innovations and the consumer products that you're seeing today, right now?
The fact that Pakistan has about 65% of its population under the age of 30
Yeah.
means that snacking is here to stay.
Yeah.
And I feel globally as well as in Pakistan, the fact that food, what we used to call center of the table at Unilever, which was a meal,
Yeah.
and snacks, I think the bifurcation between center of the table meals and snacks is really kind of merging together. It's blurring the differentiation between that. I myself have an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old. For them, a snack is, by the way, a main meal. My son is at university. For him, all his meals are a snack, which are not only fulfilling his appetite, but they're also fulfilling his emotional need of munching and constantly be eating something. So I think the more snacks, the more the line, the distinction between snacking and main meals blurs, the more this market becomes exciting. And that's really the innovation area that I'm the most excited about.
So, as the chairperson of the Pakistan Advertiser Society, how do you see the advertising and the branding landscape evolving now in the food and FMCG sector?
I just feel, the more we've become dependent on AI, the more we talk about technology taking over, the creative field. Somewhere, the fundamentals of how you create a brand, how you craft a brand, those fundamental principles that Unilever taught us very well, Procter and Gamble's taught this country very well, Reckitt Benckiser has taught this country very well. Those seem to be a bit diminishing a little bit because everything is just so spontaneous and instant, right? I can get a campaign on AI. Now, even on AI, the other day I was telling somebody the output is as good as the input or the prompt that you put on AI. I think there's an immense responsibility for the Pakistan Advertiser Society to actually uplift capability of understanding brands, crafting brands, understanding consumers, and crafting products in line with what your categories are asking for. I feel that's kind of a diminishing, capability now, because things have just become so technologically advanced and so dependent on digital that I feel a lot of crap in, crap out is happening when it comes to, campaigns and communication and speaking to consumers.
Yeah.
And one pillar that we added to the Pakistan Advertiser Society, we were anyways doing a lot of regulatory work. We were doing a lot of coordination on having a single currency for media deployment and media accuracy in the country. Now we're spreading our wings a little bit more and saying, with events like Math Sample, with recognition that we do under the FEs, can we really instill better capability in the creative industry of Pakistan? That is not only, again, a personal passion point, but also something that the office bearers of PAS are taking as a huge responsibility as we move into the next 3 years.
Right, right. So, given today's economic shifts, how important do you think this digital transformation is for the consumer marketing?
It's not only important, it's now all consumer marketing is based or is coming out of digital,
Yeah.
right? The last time I saw TV, as definitely not a Gen Z. I had, well, I'm not a baby boomer, but definitely a Gen X. I think the last time I saw TV properly, like watching content
Yeah.
on a screen, was maybe about a year back, or maybe even more than that, or maybe when I'm traveling and I see it on a small screen when I'm on a plane. I've just stopped seeing the big screen or regular TV screen. If I, being an oldie, and am not looking at TV at all, that in itself is a huge reminder of how our world is evolving. My kids are sitting in Pakistan and they actually know everything that's happening in America, in the UK, in Europe. because that's how small the world has become. That's how connected the world has become. So be it trends on snacking, be it trends on digital campaigns, be it trends on be it influencers. I don't think we're very soon we're moving into having no boundaries for where those influencers come in, right? So while right now we still depend a lot on Pakistani influencers selling shampoo, selling fabric wash, selling food,
Yeah.
eventually it actually will be global influencers, because that's what the world has become. So I don't think it's about how important is digital. It is about we are within a digitally native audience. How much can we immerse deeper into that digital world? That really is the right kind of view on that way forward.
That's right. Influencer marketing has already taken over the world. It has. Anyway, uh, Faheen, looking back at your journey, what mindset shift do you think is the most important for women now? To move from just managing a business to actually scaling it.
Again, something that I've used at a lot of sessions that I do with women,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's a very popular choice of a statement that I'm going to make right now. I really think it's high time that Pakistani women stopped thinking of log kya kahenge.
Oh, yes.
I genuinely think we should stop blaming the last generation, or we were brought up with mothers who made the world very important for us, or we need, we have in-laws who stop us from doing things, or we have a husband who's not supportive. I think enough of that, honestly. Don't put your lack of push on somebody else's push upon you. Let's accept that we ourselves find a lot of comfort and maybe protection in log kya kahenge. Sometimes you also use that as an excuse, to be very honest, right? And every time I meet a young woman, and I wish I had a daughter who I could say this to, लोग क्या कहेंगे से पहले आप ये पूछें आपका अपना सोल क्या कह रहा है. If your own soul is telling you that you're on the right path, if your own soul is at peace,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what people are saying. And I think when the more I speak to women, and I try to diagnose Asian culture, the more I realize, much more than the Europeans or the Americans, somehow the Asian, kind of gender discrimination between men and women is all based on guilt, fear, a sense of, how shall I say it, a lack of self confidence, all hubbed around what is the world going to think of me? What is somebody else going to think of me? And I really, and now I'm way older than a lot of the young women that I speak to. I'm way older than you. My deepest advice to women who want to break barriers,
Hmm.
first and foremost, ask yourself, what are you happy with? What is your definition of achievement? What is your definition of, accomplishment? What would make you be proud of yourself? I'm not at all saying be dismissive towards the world. Please don't see this as two extremes. That I don't give, I don't care about the world. That's not what I'm trying to say. But don't care about the world over and above your own emotional, mental, and physical well being. And I meet so many women. I meet women all the time who will judge themselves on the basis of what their mothers in law, their husbands, their fathers in law, sometimes even distant in laws, what their kids' teachers are saying to them, what other people at their office are saying to them. It does not matter if you yourself are unclear on what is making you happy. I remember a friend of mine, a very, very dear friend of mine, and she's again, she's leading a big organization. And she said, and I was on Lipton in those days, so that analogy made even more sense. She said, how can an empty teapot fill out other people's cups? And an empty teapot, if you yourself are empty from inside, how are you expected to fill out any cup? You can't. So you just need to, and a lot of people would put that down as a sign of selfishness. But I very recently read somewhere that selfish also starts with self.
Yeah.
And then ish. Your own self needs to be very, very contained and very content. Once that is achieved, everything else falls into place. And the more you practice knowing what your soul is saying to you, and it really is, there has to be a mechanism of you listening to your soul. Once you discover that mechanism for yourself, I can reassure you, you will always know when your soul is saying something different to what you're doing. And the moment you make that shift and you do exactly what your soul is saying, you'll come out to be the most powerful, self of your own abilities. I've done this repeatedly over the last 10 years. I learned this mechanism when I was in Turkey. I got some time on my own. I reevaluated my life. I've had a ball of a time shifting myself according to what my soul was telling me. And I will tell you, once your soul and you and your actions, so your inner and your outer actions are all in the same direction, the world does come around and the world does become part of that action. I've seen that in many decisions I've made. I left Lipton about now 9 months back. You know, I honestly was unclear on what my next steps were. I just knew that I needed to move on. A lot of people didn't understand that decision. A lot of people all not only quizzed me on that decision, a lot of people were sitting on the corners almost judging that decision. I knew that. I would meet people and I would understand that they were really curious about what it is that I wanted to do. I picked up a role at Smile Industries. I picked it up months before I actually joined them. Uh, and I did not join them because I just wanted to be with my children. I wanted to settle my son down at university. I just wanted to take a break. A lot of people didn't understand what that meant because I hadn't had a break. I've not had a break since my graduation, right? S- Did any of that matter to me? Honestly, not at all. Because now I practiced, being one with my soul so much that every time somebody would ask me and say, "But I'm sure you have something in mind. What are you going to do after Lipton?" It really did not bother me. Sometimes my husband would say, "But we went somewhere for dinner.
Yeah.
All people wanted to ask about was where are you stepping out next? What are you doing next? Aren't you irritated?" I was like, "No, I'm not," because it's they're curious. I'm very clear what I'm going to do, and I actually was very clear. I, as a mandate, put down for myself that I will not go to a multinational. As a mandate, I said, I want to get into a local company. I want to understand entrepreneurship more. I want to live and be with entrepreneurs to see how their minds are wired because clearly their minds are not wired like corporate entities,
Right.
right? So once you become one with your soul,
Hmm.
decisions become very easy. Actions become very easy. Actions are very difficult and complicated when your inner being is telling you something else and the outside world is saying something else and you're confused between the two. I'm too old now to be confused, to be very honest. I'm crystal clear in what it is that I want to do. And that really starts from within. It doesn't start from log kya kahenge.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the experiences actually shape you this way. Your experiences actually shape you completely this way. And I'm glad that you chose this and you took a right decision for your own self. Because again, लोग क्या कहेंगे में फिर वो बहुत दफा ऐसा ही होता कि maybe you wouldn't have stepped up to do something. And again,
और लोग तो फिर भी कहेंगे,
yeah, of course.
आप कुछ भी कर लें, लोग कुछ
That's what I tell my mom always.
एटलीस्ट ये ना हो कि आप वापस घर आएं, लोग तो एनीवेज कुछ कहेंगे, पर अगर आप खुद अपने आप को क्वेश्चन कर रहे हैं एट द एंड ऑफ द डे, तब तो पूरा दिन ही बेकार हो गया. At least come back home
Right.
and be content and be contained
Yeah.
about what it is that you've achieved that day.
Right.
If that answer is a resounding positive,
Right.
you've achieved the world. You've scaled another mountain.
Right, right. That's true. A person should be fully satisfied by their own decisions. That's the most important thing. And I always think that, how can these women entrepreneurs or even women can, learn to say no without guilt? Okay, to the clients, to the partner, to the family expectations. How do you learn to say no?
You do it with politeness.
Yeah.
And you do it with logic.
Hmm.
Again, nobody wants to hear, especially clients or let's say bosses or board directors. That you always have somebody that you're reporting into,
Yeah,
right? Even if you are the owner of your own business, there'll always be those clients that you might find saying very difficult too. I think human nature is built on understanding logic.
Yeah.
If a no comes from your previous experience, honestly, in today's world, that has lesser value than a no coming on, than a no based on data, logic for why you're saying that no. If a no becomes just a tug of war of emotions, nobody's going to understand it. And that's why whenever I've said no, and I've said no many, many times in my in my life, I've said that on the
So you
basis
have
of
said it without guilt. Okay. Right.
yeah. The
Yeah.
last 10 years I've learned not to not. So the two things that really drag you down: guilt and fear,
Both. Okay.
and both I've tried to
Mm.
to manage in my own way.
Yeah.
When you say no, do it with logic and data, and I think people will understand that. I think as a starting point, don't assume that your no will not be understood. It's not understood when it's a flat no and more out of aggression versus logic. Replace that aggression with logic. Everybody will understand a no.
Yeah, that's right. Um, Women wait until they feel fully ready, right? How do you think they can, women, especially women entrepreneurs, how do you think they can, overcome this and step into the leadership roles more confidently?
Because there's always a little bit of self-doubt with women. I think as overall as a gender nuance,
Yeah.
we keep cross-checking our own behavior, our own, input into any activity that we do.
Yeah.
Men have it slightly easier because they're just born with this, with this machoism of, but we've done it, so it must be right. For women, it's absolutely the opposite. We've
Yeah.
done it, let's check it 5 more times. Maybe we've not done it properly enough, right? So I think so again, knowing yourself very well
Mm-hmm.
is one way of being able to not keep cross-checking and not waiting for the ideal time to launch anything or to experiment with anything. That's one. Second, I I really do believe that, when you've piloted something,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's half baked, you pilot it, you know it's half baked, you see the results, and you change that pilot again, and you make a few changes to that pilot and repilot it. I think that mindset of smaller pilots multiple times versus one big launch,
Yeah.
at least personally, that's helped me a lot. Originally, when I started leading businesses, for me, it would be like, okay, I'd take one call and that's for all of Pakistan. And then I realized not really. Pakistan is a huge, Pakistan is actually mini Pakistan. There are many, many, mini, kind of countries within Pakistan. Each one of our provinces actually on taste, on type of people, on population, demography, very, very different. Do an experiment in one, see if it works, make a few changes, then take it to the rest of Pakistan. So that mindset of, I can actually be half ready, and that half readiness can take me into a smaller pilot. I take back results from that pilot, I mathematically, numerically evaluate that pilot, and then scale it up. At least personally, that's really helped me out in my management style.
Wonderful. Great. It's actually a great advice for the women who are watching us. So, yeah. Okay, friends. So, we'll be doing a quick fire round with you.
Sure.
So, the answers should be quick. Okay.
Quick fire. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So, morning person or a night owl?
Clearly a morning person. Clearly.
Looks like. Tea or coffee?
Tea, of course. I'm ex Lipton. Not coffee at all. Tea. Always tea.
Best advice you've ever received?
An empty kettle or teapot cannot fill out any cups.
Yeah. One habit that fuels your success?
Um, 2 vacations a year, only with family, totally being cut off from work.
Great. Dream vacation destination?
It's not even a dream vacation spot.
Right.
It's actually something that
Well,
my husband and I
I should, I think, rephrase it that one of your favorite
favorite.
vacation
Yes, just make it that.
destinations.
Make it that. London. My husband and I are very, very fond of that city. It's very unfortunate that it's going through a lot of security hazards right now, but it is absolutely a magical, magical place, especially over Christmas time. There's nothing like London during Christmas.
One quality every woman should have.
The ability to say sorry, I was wrong,
Mhm.
or sorry, I've erred. I think that's a strong one.
Most underrated skill in leadership.
Vulnerability. I think leaders need to show
Hmm.
that they're humans too. And I think especially in Pakistan, because there are so many male leaders and such few female leaders, I think when I show vulnerability, because I have cried, on certain days at the office. I have shown my emotions. I have broken down. I have been very angry and very happy and very joyful and very sad all, on a single day, because that's what women are. I feel vulnerability is something that a lot of people underrate, and it's just something so human. Every time I've shown my vulnerability, I've felt my connections with my team growing.
Great. Best way to recharge after a long week?
Cooking, for me personally, I find cooking very therapeutic. Very therapeutic. Yeah, there are a few things that I like making. I'm not a huge. I don't have a long list of recipes
Yeah.
that I know, but the things that I genuinely enjoy making, which is Oriental food, and I enjoy serving that. And my kids are obsessive about Thai food. So every time I'm really stressed out, if you see me making a lot of food, my husband has now recognized that as a sign that I'm stressed at work, because I'll come home and I'll just make a lot of food.
Oh,
So that's a sign that I'm the day hasn't gone very well.
ah. Okay, so one thing you cannot start your day without.
Checking in on both my kids. One in university in college in Pakistan, one abroad. Without checking in on them, just knowing where they are,
Yeah.
I can't start my day without that.
Favorite snack when working late?
Granola bars.
Oh. A word that describes your leadership style.
Bold.
One thing you wish everyone knew about leadership.
That it's not a destination. It's a journey. Every day I feel that there are nuances of my leadership which are either getting sharpened or getting thrown aside by me. Every day I feel that. So I don't think there's any destination of I am a CEO, so I am a leader. Not at all. I think every day, even when you are way lower on a hierarchical level, every day you're learning and developing as a leader.
Great. So, Farheen, to end this, please share one book, one habit, and one belief that every entrepreneur should build.
So there's one, the book, I read the book after seeing, his TED talk. Simon Sinek talks about, start with why. And I think, you know, tomorrow if I want to go into my own business, or I actually lead this business at Smile Industries genuinely like it is my own business, understand the why and not the what. What becomes very easy. You first need to know what is the why of any step or any business that you're creating.
Yeah.
So that connection of what you passionately believe in and the output of that business, that's deadly. And the book is Start With Why, which is by Simon Sinek. Absolutely favorite book, favorite TED talk. Habit, doing small things repetitively.
Yeah.
I think the resilience that you build in having a flywheel effect. So there's another book which I'm very fond of, which is called Good to Great. Jim Collins, he just talks about how don't think that one day you start the day, you do a big strategic call, and everything will fall, into place.
Yeah.
It's really the small details and the repetitive details
Yeah.
that become into flywheels of success. So supposing you're managing your own business and you have a sales force. Every day knowing what your sales force is doing and what the sales pitch is and reviewing that sales pitch with them every day, that's a small action that has a huge impact. So just absolutely, I've done this on my own businesses. I've done this in the companies that I've led. It has those small changes are really what gets you the next 5 years of a roadmap of success. Last one was
One belief.
one belief as a leader. Um, don't ever expect the ideal outcome. We live in a world which is constantly changing. The superpowers of this world are changing literally overnight. So don't at all assume any PNL, any business case that is done on a piece of paper
Yeah.
for the next 3 years, this is how life will be or the business will be. That's just not realistic. So just make a business case knowing that things will go wrong. I think what you need to have beyond that piece of paper is the resilience to redo a business case every time there is something that goes wrong at a macro environmental level, because it will. But post COVID, I don't think that the world has found its base again, to be very honest. So just one absolute fundamental faith, things will keep changing. Have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D every time, there is a cosmic shift anywhere on your business case.
Right. So, thank you, Faheen, for sharing your powerful insights with us today and also for the practical advices for the women and the women entrepreneurs, of course. Um, through your journey, we have learned, and I think this also shows us that leadership is, of course, built step by step through confidence and purpose, and not forgetting resilience. So, yes, all those watching us, I hope you take these lessons forward in your own journeys. That's very important. Start over if you have an idea. I always say this. Thank you so much for watching us. This is Mariam signing off from Women Entrepreneurs of Asia. Take care. Keep shining, keep building, and keep leading with heart. Allah Hafiz.